We take a break from the main plot to see how Jeremy is getting along with his, mission. And we're left to guess what exactly happened before this. Did she tie him up with his own strings first? Or was he already tangled when she found him?
I don't understand what I'm doing here.
I think you can come snooping about, looting and pilfering, just when everyone's away.
There's not too much to talk about here, but I wouldn't say that this scene is entirely filler. The shrew does say some interesting things. For one, she assumes Jeremy came here to loot the Frisby home, which, to be fair, finding pretty objects is kind of the whole reason he's in this story, but she also has it in her head that he's in league with the rats, something that he probably didn't prompt himself.
I know you're in league with those awful rats.
What rats?
Hoodlums, the lot of you.
Why did you say rats?
Good question. Why do the rats bother her so much? Now that we've seen them, we know just how disconnected they try to stay with others, keeping their distance from the outside world. It's doubtful that they even know the shrew exists, yet she's so clearly paranoid with them.
You think the world owes you a living, right?
Right.
Wrong.
Wrong.
The two don't really have a conversation. It's more the shrew talking at him, venting out her insecurities.
The sooner you delinquents learn that you must earn your own way, the sooner, the better.
This seems to imply that she knows the rats are stealing, or that she's witnessed their activities to some degree. The shrew's clearly very invested in the state of the field and its inhabitants, so it makes sense for her to be on guard against potential threats. But the sheer level of animosity she has seems to indicate something deeper. She really seems to bring them up a lot. If a fire were to break out in the field, she'd probably find a way to blame the rats for it. But then, maybe it's just because animals like rats and crows already have a negative stigma about them. Maybe I'm simply reading into this too much. Maybe. The shrew leaves and gets the children to guard her new prisoner.
I shall return.
Well, I guess we better untie him. But Martin.
They're pretty quick on the uptake and figure out an idea of what's going on.
Tie you back up.
The rose bush, to see the rats. The owl said they're good and smart. Get it?
You had one job, Jeremy. At this point, it's clear that Mrs. Frisby's children won't be having an active role in this story, as Jeremy, inadvertently, convinced them to stay at the house and not go looking for her.
You're right. He's a loony.
Which means that the plot of the film hinges entirely on Mrs. Frisby as its main focus. I'm only mentioning this because it's pretty rare to see a story solely from the viewpoint of a parent, notably a single parent. Not that it's rare to get parent-led stories in animation, far from it. Movies like Finding Nemo and Hotel Transylvania do this, but the difference here is that those films have the children making meaningful decisions, and make an equal, or near equal, impact on the events as the parent does. Like when the story cuts back to Nemo or Mavis having their own trials and tribulations, their actions shaping the plot to some degree. It's not that the Frisby children aren't well written. They are, for what time they're given. It's just that this is Mrs. Frisby's story alone. I imagine the former is more common because the filmmakers know that children and parents will be watching. So it makes sense to make movies where both the children and the parents are prominent. I'm not even saying that one method is better than the other. It's just refreshing.
Get on with it!
Be brief.
Yes,
Say what you want, then leave.
I won't be a bother.
Easing us back into the main plot, we see Aegis preparing Mrs. Frisby to finally meet Nicodemus face to face, who is, as of now, the final character to be formally introduced, which ties up neatly with him also being the first character that we saw. We actually know quite a lot about Nicodemus already, having picked up pieces of info along the way. When the Great Owl spoke to Mrs. Frisby, it was his name that he mentioned. We know that he's a figurehead behind the plan, thanks to the scene in the lift.
He's before the council now. This time he's attacking Nicodemus openly.
And the plan, no doubt.
We've also put some things together from watching him observe the events of Mrs. Frisby's story. He was quite close to her husband, Jonathan, with his death clearly having quite the impact on him. Enough to observe Mrs. Frisby's plight, seemingly wanting to help her, yet never reaching out directly, only watching. To summarize, we have a rough idea of what kind of person he is, but we've never seen him interact with anyone. So we, just like Mrs. Brisby, don't really know what to expect from this encounter. As Mr. Aegis leads her, he instructs Mrs. Brisby on how she should behave with Nicodemus, almost as if he's royalty.
Brief.
Now, the intended effect of this is to build up suspense, proliferating him up as someone's time you shouldn't waste. But it also just goes to show how much Mr. Aegis respects Nicodemus to say all of this. It means a lot coming from him, who doesn't seem the type to impress easily.
I won't be a bother.
Justin bothers him enough with all his silly nonsense.
Thank you, Mr. Aegis.
I don't know what Nicodemus sees in that boy.
Yes, interesting that Justin was made captain of the guard. Presumably, that would mean he outranks most other rats, yet we haven't seen any obvious qualities that would have earned him his title. It probably wasn't for his pranking skills. I also just want to point out that whilst there was an important meeting going on, he decided to hang back just to do this.
Gotcha, bitch!
We've already had a ton of build-up for this meeting, but the film manages to squeeze in just a little bit more.
Come closer, my child. Don't be frightened.
Funnily enough, the first interaction Nicodemus has with Mrs. Brisby is to feign ignorance.
The great owl sent me to you.
Oh, did he?
An interesting detail with this scene is how reminiscent it is with meeting the Great Owl, with the film drawing deliberate parallels between him and Nicodemus. They have the same designed eyebrows and long flowing facial hair, as well as the same eye glow effect. They also both have the thematic role of being keepers of knowledge for our protagonist. But where one was intimidating and only raised several new questions, the other is going out of his way to be completely open and gentle. Mrs. Brisby would understandably be a bit freaked out if she knew that Nicodemus had been watching her from the beginning. Instead, he wants to keep a level of rapport with her and not to appear too overwhelming.
Oh, did he? He is a dear comrade.
With only a few seconds into their conversation, this shows us just how humble, mature, and thoughtful Nicodemus is. It's a good little bit of character building, because it gives you an idea of why he's looked up to by the others, and probably why he's the one leading them. Speaking of the Great Owl, this seems like a good time to talk about how much mysticism is in this film, with the amount of references we have to fairy tales and mythology. Nicodemus is very clearly representing a type of wizard or sage, with his long beard and robes, and how he manipulates objects with what appears to be borderline magic. The other rats are seen wearing medieval-looking garments and wielding swords and spears. And Justin would be your typical dashing knight in armor, being the captain of the guard. Following the pattern then, the Great Owl would be something like a dragon, granting wisdom to whomever has the nerve to seek it. And Mrs. Brisby would be the equivalent of a naive peasant girl, donning a simple raggedy cloak. I thought this worth mentioning because it's a design choice completely made up by Don Bluth, who wanted more fantasy elements in his film. He took a lot of liberties when adapting the story, which, to be fair, is something you have to do when you're translating book into film. As for how well he implemented them, well, I have my thoughts. I'll bring it back up later.
Ah, Mrs. Jonathan Brisby. What an honor this is.
This meeting with Nicodemus is the point where the film decides to have its massive payoff, where all the last remaining questions are answered. Mrs. Brisby decides to start with the most immediate one on her mind, as Nicodemus, like everyone else, greeted her by her husband's name.
He was a great friend to the rats of NIMH. He himself came from NIMH.
He goes on to show her the same book he was writing from the prologue, allowing her to read for herself what happened to her husband.
He was killed today while drugging the farmer's cat, Dragon.
Moving towards the bigger questions.
I never knew. Why did he never tell me about any of you? Why?
Using his seeing mirror, we get a flashback sequence. It's not clear what exactly Mrs. Brisby sees, whether it only works with Nicodemus's memories or something else. There's a lot that this film leaves unexplained, something I'll also touch back up on later. This scene is probably what most people think of when they remember The Secret of NIMH, and for good reason. It's accompanied by a series of creatively vivid and dark images. The start of the flashback shows rats running through what looks like a skeletal structure, with jolts of electricity running both through it and the rats. But notice how the structure looks suspiciously like something else. DNA. At the same time, Nicodemus begins the story by saying this.
In the beginning, we were ordinary street rats.
You see, the backstory has only just started, and the film has already given us clues on what must have happened. In other words, the flashback is foreshadowing itself. Nicodemus also describes how they lived before they were caught by NIMH, depending on humans and their resources.
Stealing our daily bread and living off the efforts of man's work.
Which is very interesting, because it isn't actually necessary to explain this to Mrs. Brisby. Everyone knows how rats live. It's interesting because he decided to include that part, hinting that maybe it's important in some way, or at least that he thinks it is. Nicodemus recounts how him and his fellows were held by NIMH.
There were many animals there. They were put through the most unspeakable tortures to satisfy some scientific curiosity.
Now at this point, we have all the pieces of information to figure out exactly what happened to the rats, why they're able to invent such advanced technology from scrap, how they're able to read and write and use electricity, and why NIMH is investigating the farm now, looking for them. But the sequence confirms it for us, in gruesome detail.
20 rats and 11 mice were given injections. Our world began changing. One night, I looked upon the words under the cage door and understood them. We had become intelligent.
He goes on to describe how the rats came together with the mice to escape. We can see that they were being kept in very simple confinements. Most likely, the scientists of NIMH didn't realize just how smart their rodent subjects had become, until it was too late. They hatched a plan to use the air ducts, but unfortunately, nearly all of the mice perished.
All except 2, Jonathan and Mr. Ages. We were trapped by a locked door on the roof. It was Jonathan who made possible the unlocking of the door.
With the end of Nicodemus's story, we can now start to unpack. Let's get over the obvious parts first. Yeah, this is really dark content. We've had imagery involving death, animal torture, unethical genetic experimentation. God, I just love it. What? Don't look at me like that. I know you like it too. You want to know how I know? Because you're still watching. Here, let me get more specific. I like dark content when it's telling an intelligent story, when there's a purpose behind it. Ultimately, the film has been telling us 2 stories at once, with a huge juxtaposition between them. Mrs. Brisby going from character to character trying to save her son is at the forefront. It's easy to understand and told to the audience directly. There's nothing obscure or complex going on about Mrs. Brisby or her journey. Everyone's been sick as a child, or have had to care for a family member. You're feeling small and helpless when you have a big responsibility. On the other hand, the Rats of NIMH's story is anything but simple. You have to pay attention and think about the implications of what the characters are saying. What we see and hear raises questions on the nature of morality, technology, and ethics. So, what's my point? That animation is fully capable of telling complex stories, that making films for both children and adults that tackle darker themes in a mature way is not only possible, but should be encouraged, lest we forget how. Anyway, I'm supposed to be analyzing a movie. The reason why the mystery element in The Secret of NIMH is so well executed is because the film gave us everything to figure it out on our own. Right from the beginning, we've had these background details, like little Easter eggs, that helped paint us a picture of what was going on with the rats. As Nicodemus was writing in the prologue, if we read the journal, we see Jenna being mentioned. During the scene where Mr. Ages is making Timmy's medicine, we can see that he too has a book, referencing NIMH in the background. Details that most people would easily miss on the first watch, but they were there. We could even figure out an idea of what happened to the rats as early as the scene with the farmer and his wife. How the National Institute of Mental Health had been asking questions about them. Why else would that specific government agency be looking for them if something hadn't happened to them mentally? This is what I would call the hallmark of a good mystery, especially because the dialogue from the farmer's wife wasn't forced in any way. It would be perfectly natural to tell her husband this, because it might be a danger for them.
I have to get up early.
Oh, it gives me goosebumps to hear him carry on that way. Like the rats might have some horrible disease.
Night.
This way, you feed the audience valuable info and avoid bloated exposition.
Good.
As he gives her the amulet, he proclaims it to have some sort of dormant power. Mrs. Frisby doesn't inquire as to what power exactly though, and just seems to be overwhelmed by the fact that Jonathan left her something.
When worn by one with a courageous heart, the stone glows red. Courage of the heart is very rare. The stone has a power when it's there.
So, we still don't know what it does. All we know is that Nicodemus didn't want it falling into Jenna's hands.
You can unlock any door if you only have the key.
Their meeting ends with Nicodemus answering her initial question. The reason Jonathan kept everything a secret was because of the genetic engineering from the injections. That they not only increased their intelligence, but their lifespan as well.
You see, you would have grown old while he remained young.
And, seeming unable to bear the grief of telling her, chose to leave her in blissful ignorance. There's something else that makes this reveal a little more depressing. Right before Mrs. Frisby learns the truth about her husband, she offhandedly says this.
I can read a little. Jonathan taught me. The children are better than I am.
Another one of the movie's little foreshadowing hints. Since Mrs. Frisby's children are the offspring of Jonathan, this implies that they inherited his advanced intellect. Therefore, they will more than likely far outlive their mother as well. It can't be nice to know that your life will only be a footnote in the lives of your loved ones. The film only slips this in, but the book goes into it a bit more, where some of the rat colony had children of their own, and noted how quickly they seemed to learn. So it's understandable that Jonathan knew this as well, and decided to just let his family live a simple, happy life, with whatever time Mrs. Frisby had. Sad as this might be, it also shines a new light on the dynamic between the Frisby children and the shrew. Going way back to our first scene, she makes this little remark before leaving the house.
And moving days at hand. Prepare to move your very, very odd family.
You can maybe see where I'm going with this. The reason the shrew is so antagonistic towards the rats is not just because they're stealing. After all, rats have been living off of humans for thousands of years. It's because of how human-like they behave, how unnatural it is. All other animals, like the ones that live in the field or the great owl in the forest, live with the environment. They adapt to it in order to survive. The rats, however, don't. Instead, they shape the environment to better suit them, like humans do. This way of being is simply too alien for the shrew, too beyond her understanding, and that's why she fears them so much. It's the reason she doesn't think to ask them for help for Mrs. Frisby, and why she distrusts Mr. Ages, who also acts just a bit too human-like for her taste. The great owl, however, she does understand. Wisdom she can recognize. Intelligence, no. It makes sense then why she feels the need to mother the children so much, to scold Martin for mouthing off, to try to nurture and guide them in the right direction in Mrs. Brisby's absence. That maybe they're just a bit too sharp-witted for their own good, a bit too free-thinking. All of this from just a few throwaway lines, the results of efficient dialogue. All of these revelations mark the end of the secret of NIMH. What's left now is the conclusion.
Tonight, we must move your house to the protected side of the stone.
The lee of the stone.
Yes.
However, foul play is afoot.
With Nicodemus out of the way, what's to stop us from taking over?
Jenna plans to use the house moving as a proxy in an attempt to assassinate Nicodemus.
The Brisby house is a large cement block. In the moving, what if it should fall?
But that means he doesn't care about Mrs. Brisby at all.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
Yeah, it could be very easy to call Jenna a bit, unremarkable as a villain. That he's just power-hungry, with not a whole lot of characterization otherwise. But I would never call him a blank slate. He represents a lot of things that will be very important towards the end. But while we're on the subject of characters, now that we've met them all, we can go a little deeper.
That's what she said.
Despite how little dialogue some of them get, we have a pretty good understanding of both their opinions and ideals. For example, Mr. Ages is cautious to the extreme, someone we've seen to be highly intelligent even amongst his peers, and, perhaps with the exception of Nicodemus, is the most aware of how much is at stake. He understands that one wrong move could spell the end of everything that he, Jonathan, and the rats have accomplished, which is why he's so standoffish with everyone. So much so that Justin makes fun of him for it.
Come on, you suspicious old goat.
Justin, on the other hand, gladly took a moment to simply appreciate the lighting of the rosebush, whereas Mr. Ages had nothing to say.
It's the most beautiful sight I've ever seen.
Being too focused on the task at hand. Auntie Shrew is actually quite similar to Ages in terms of personality. Irritable, suspicious, always trying to get the last word in. But instead of trying to keep herself detached from others, she very much wants to be involved in people's lives. We can glean all of these aspects from just watching their actions, but the film does something else that helps characterize them. Here, let me show you what I mean.
To Ages, that old flim-flam. Whatever for?
Justin bothers him enough with all his silly nonsense.
You are welcome here. We tend to take ourselves a little too seriously.
I don't know what Nicodemus sees in that boy.
It's refreshing, Jenner. Usually you're screaming about us.
The Thorn Valley Plan is the aspiration of idiots and dreamers.
Jenna, I fear, could do her harm. He is consumed by a lust for power.
We get a lot of dialogue from characters, voicing their opinions on other characters. And notice how often Mrs. Brisby has nothing to do with it, despite her being the protagonist. It leaves room for the side characters to have more depth, and to keep them distinct. To put it bluntly, it helps us to understand them. If we don't understand the characters, the story doesn't work. We've had Justin treat Jenna like he's a dramatic politician.
Good old Jenner.
And Mr. Ages treating him like a serious threat. And this scene confirms that Mr. Ages was right about Jenna. There's too many names that start with J.
Jonathan?
Jeremy?
Jenner.
Justin!
Jason!
As for Jenna's motives, for one reason or another, he wants the rats to stay the course that they're on, to continue the easy path of stealing.
Once rid of Nicodemus, the plan will die. We can stay here as long as we like.
The fact that he makes fun of his cohorts, who will go unnamed for the whole film, for not wanting to kill Nicodemus gives us a bit of insight into why.
Jenner, you can't kill Nicodemus. No taste for blood, huh? They've taken the animal out of you.
It seems to imply that some part of him wants to stay primal, to continue to live like a rat, despite being uplifted from human influence. In essence, he wants to return to monkey, or rat. Rat, monkey, there was probably a good pun in there somewhere, I don't know. In the next scene, we see Justin and Nicodemus giving Mrs. Brisby a lift back to her house. To make small talk, Justin mentions that they're under the old mill.
It's falling apart. Hope it stays up there. At least until we've done with the plan.
Most likely, the same mill that we saw Mrs. Brisby and Jeremy in. After hearing it mentioned enough times, Mrs. Brisby finally asks what the plan is.
To live without stealing, of course.
Something that we were able to figure out already. But now, we get more insights as to why this is so important. Justin, being the younger one, gives a very basic answer.
It's wrong to take electricity from the farmer.
Nicodemus, however, adds something a lot more profound.
We can no longer live as rats. We know too much.
Such a simple line, and yet it implies so much. It calls back to the story of the rats of NIMH, when he described how they lived off the efforts of humans. But now that they have the ability to do more, to be better, it comes with the responsibility to do so. Also, with what we've learned about Nicodemus, he seems to be worried about the future of his rat colony. I'll try my best to break down everything we've had so far in text and subtext. More specifically, he's worried about Jenna, and how he could cause a lot of problems if he ever laid hands on the mysterious amulet. The amulet that, as far as he's concerned, rightfully belongs to Mrs. Brisby, which, incidentally, means that she's now at risk. That's the text. The subtext is what effect Jenna could have on the others. He represents a potential future that the rats could have. So far, there's been a lot of pushback on Jenna's propaganda, and in his mind, Nicodemus is the biggest obstacle. But the truth is, whether or not Jenna succeeds in removing him, Nicodemus won't be around forever.
Now don't tire him out.
No.
Be brief.
Bottom line, he's old. Definitely shown to be the oldest among them anyway, and he's more than aware of it. It would explain why he was so eager to meet Mrs. Brisby, watching her every step of the way. Better to get the stone in her hand sooner rather than later, lest Jenna get to it first. And as for when he passes on, it would seem that Justin would take his place. We've had a couple of characters mention indirectly how close the two are.
What about Justin?
Leave him to me.
It makes sense that Nicodemus would want him to lead in his stead. Though a bit lax, he's someone with the correct morals and virtues. He represents what Nicodemus thinks the rats should be. We saw how Justin warmed up nicely to Mrs. Brisby, despite her not actually being one of them. We've only ever seen him treat her with respect, even involving her into their goings-on.
When we have a long project that takes us into the open, Mr. Aegis makes up a sleeping powder to give to Dragon.
How do you get him to take it?
It might not seem like a big deal, but it is when you compare how the other rats view Mrs. Brisby and outsiders like her.
Send her away!
Let's get back to business.
Urgent problems of our own. Let the lower creatures fend for themselves.
There have been other, more subtle details that hint towards their sense of superiority, like the primitive means they use to scare off others who might wander too close. Remember the scary face? Or maybe how Brutus treated Mrs. Brisby like a simple animal, not even bothering to speak to her. It's difficult to imagine Nicodemus or Justin treating anyone from outside the colony this way. When they speak to Mrs. Brisby, nothing they say implies that they view her as any less than equal. It's a dangerous way of thinking that just because you're smarter than someone, you're better than them. It all comes back to that one simple line.
We know too much.
It's not just about stealing, it's about everything. They may never have asked for the gift of intelligence, but regardless, they have it now, and they can never return to the primitive lives that they once had. The rats need to choose how they're going to conduct themselves in this world, and they need to choose wisely. Mrs. Brisby, having nothing to add after a response like that, awkwardly tries to say goodbye.
Your Majesty, I should go prepare the children for tonight.
Though something is obviously on her mind.
About Dragon, maybe? Oh, nothing.
Something Justin reminded her of a moment ago. A loose end.
Someone must go into the farmhouse kitchen and put it in his dish. Aegis tried it yesterday. That's how he broke his leg.
Now, they're about to start a large operation, and no one else is able to drug Dragon.
The only way into the kitchen is through a tiny hole in the floor.
The rats have already agreed to move the house. Mrs. Brisby's quest is effectively over. It's all in their hands now, and she can finally return to her children. But what does she do?
I volunteer. For Dragon.
This scene is roughly 3 minutes, and all they're doing is traveling from point A to point B. And yet, there's so much to pick apart. It might be the best scene in the whole film. No, really though. Obvious part first, Mr. Ages can't drug Dragon with a broken leg, and Mrs. Brisby is the only one small enough to make the attempt. Of course, because of the clear level of danger involved, they were never going to ask her to do it, nor imply that she should.
Oh no, Mrs. Brisby. Nicodemus, this is no job for her.
And yes, she is terrified of the prospect. It wasn't that long ago she barely escaped Dragon with her life. We can see how much she's hesitating, taking every step with so much deliberation. It did take her a moment, but she willingly offered herself. And why? Just so the operation would have that little extra chance to succeed. It's possible Dragon might not interfere with the rats, but just how it was with Timmy, that's simply not a chance she's willing to take. Danger aside, drugging Dragon is also a bit of a touchy subject. Pay close attention to Justin as he was first explaining it to Mrs. Brisby.
Someone must go into the farmhouse kitchen.
That little pause he does when he says, someone. What do you think is on his mind?
He was killed today while drugging the farmer's cat.
And now here's his wife, asking permission to potentially follow him to the grave. You can tell just by his expression, that's exactly what he's thinking. Finally, we have Nicodemus, remaining very impartial during this exchange. Unlike Justin, it's very difficult to determine what he's thinking. Mrs. Brisby was obviously trying to say something, but he doesn't try to inquire what. He just listens. And when she starts to leave, he simply sits and waits. When she decides to go through with volunteering, again, he doesn't show any reaction, only responding with a simple,
As you wish.
This is my reading on this. Nicodemus knows that she would do anything for her children, despite the odds. So, instead of influencing her in any way, he chose to wait for her to reach a decision herself. The core aspect of his character is how passive he is. As the leader of the rats, with all the means and resources at his disposal, he could have helped Mrs. Brisby at any time during the film. He clearly wants to help, but he never took a direct move to do so. He never initiated contact. Rather, he waited for Mrs. Brisby to come to him, to ask for help. Through his actions, we can tell how much Nicodemus values restraint. Just because the rats are highly capable of many things, doesn't mean they should go around doing as they please. And that's why he worries about Jenna, describing him as having a lust for power. The last thing he's interested in is having restraint. Okay. I think that's everything. I hope you see now why I rate this scene so highly. A lot of ideas, themes, and motives to break down, both from what's said and not said by these characters. It didn't rely on music or grand visuals, just simple, strong dialogue in a concise manner.
Tight, yeah!
The next scene shows Mrs. Brisby meeting Justin by the farmhouse.
Excuse me. Pardon me.
Oh yeah, almost forgot Jeremy was in this.
Ooh, sparkly.
What?
His meta role has now defaulted to being a mental break for the audience. So, having been chased away by the shrew, Mrs. Brisby cooks up a new way to keep him out of the story.
I need lots and lots of string
String.
to move the block. Go get all the string you can.
That'll take all day.
God.
Right. So anyway,
I just thought I'd mention in passing.
I don't like where this is going.
I've always wanted a sparkly of my very own.
Stop!
I don't think I like Jeremy anymore.
Won't be long now. She's washing the dishes. Here's the powder.
Even in the tense build-up to what's coming, we still find some time for characterization for both Mrs. Brisby and Justin.
I hope I haven't upset your plans.
Nonsense. What makes you say that?
Mrs. Brisby, despite her anxiety, makes small talk that has nothing to do with her current situation.
I thought I might have caused an argument.
Oh, you mean Jenner?
No problem.
That even though she's about to undergo something terrifying, she still has concern for others.
I sincerely hope you make it to Thorn Valley.
We will.
As for Justin, we really start to see those leadership qualities come to the surface, maintaining a calm and steady tone whilst instructing her on what to do.
Now take a deep breath. Concentrate on the bowl. Don't look at the door.
Inspiring confidence in her. In particular, I really like this line.
I don't think I can do this.
Yes, you can.
Because remember, he didn't like this idea from the get-go. But now that her resolve is starting to wane, he doesn't tell her to quit. He pushes her to go through with it, knowing how important it is for her. We've got some good visual details to pick apart as well. As she makes a break for the bowl, we go from a level, still camera view to these rapid Dutch angles as she sprints across the floor, with vibrant yellows and reds being the dominant colors. All visual cues that emphasize her panic. On top of that, without her cape, she looks even more vulnerable than usual.
Better leave that cape. Could get caught on something.
Her cape is part of her character design, and we're not used to seeing her without it. With a mix of good and bad luck, she succeeds her mission, but gets caught by the farmer's son. Ironically, if she hadn't have hesitated as much as she did, she probably would have gotten away with it.
I'll have to come back for you later.
It's probably worth noting, I've seen a small, yet fair, criticism regarding this scene, wherein so far, the rats have been relying on a mouse to drug the food. Yet, they could just simply make the hole bigger. This way, anyone from the rat colony could volunteer. Now, I wouldn't blame anyone for pointing out this small plot hole. However, I have two counterpoints against it. The first is that this hole could potentially get noticed by the farmer or his wife at some point, leading to it getting fixed. If they were to make it bigger, the chances of that happening would only go up. That's my minor defense. A much bigger issue would be with the rats themselves. The drug needs to be placed after the farmer's wife has put food in the bowl, but before Dragon starts eating, for obvious reasons. That makes for a very narrow time window, so the volunteer needs to run in quickly and get out. Now a rat would be far more likely to get noticed running along a kitchen floor, but a mouse? Much better suited for the job. If you're still not convinced, I'll remind you that everything the rats do is in the utmost secrecy. Everything hinges on them not giving themselves away, lest it traces back to NIMH, because if that happens, it's game over. And so far, this careful way of doing things has kept them safe, so it makes sense from their point of view to use the hole as is, to make as little modifications to the human environment as possible.
Rats. Rats?
They'll be here any minute.
We cut very briefly to the Frisby home, where it looks like the shrew is putting their children to work.
Actually, move it!
Not while I'm keeping watch.
Trying to teach them some responsibility through chores. Just to back up my earlier analysis, we can see her paranoia is reaching its peak.
I'm not afraid.
Afraid, child? I have no fear of those great hulking beasts.
This implies that they must have told her that the rats are here to help, yet her opinion hasn't changed even a little.
The barbarians come through that door. Oh, the rats!
I also appreciate this visual as the rats start to move the house, where we see the children working together to keep things in place. Meanwhile, the shrew, their responsible guardian, is too busy flipping out. While this is going on, we see Mrs. Frisby in a unique position to overhear a phone call.
Oh yeah, Nim. Yes, I know. You called about the rats in the morning. Suits me fine. Now, there's no charge or anything.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me if the farmer was having money issues. What with his plowing schedule being set back, and the rats constantly racking up the electricity bill. We barely see the farmer and his family during the film, but it's probably fair to say that their lives haven't improved with the rats being here. And this could be a reach, even for me, but that might actually be the reason he started plowing his field early this year.
Bulldoze that rose bush right out of there. I want those rats exterminated.
NIMH coming serves as a ticking clock, and something that the film kept hinting was inevitably going to happen. It was just a matter of when. Whether it was one of those nightly outings or something else that gave it away, we don't know. But now it's time to pay the piper.
Get it?
Jenna, completely unaware of this bad news, prepares to make his move, now threatening his cohort into helping him.
You're in this up to your neck.
We get a rapid series of cuts between the three perspectives. Knowing that time is running out for the rats, Mrs. Frisby can't afford to wait for a rescue. She figures out a way to escape her cage, but it demands one more test of bravery. As Mrs. Frisby makes her escape, we see everything crashing down outside. Naturally, Justin's first in line to rescue Nicodemus, but too little, too late.
Oh, no. No.
In the aftermath, Jenna steps in to pick up the pieces. Whilst everyone else seems to be in shock over what just happened, we see him making this subtle attempt to take control of the situation.
Friends, we cannot move the Frisby home.
Seizing the opportunity to slip into the leader role, while everyone else is too defeated to argue with what he's saying.
One day we shall journey to Thorn Valley, just as Nicodemus wanted. But not now.
Like a crafty politician, he feigns despair like the others, pretending to be in mourning, all the while steering the rats into the direction he actually believes in.
Let us return to the rosebush, where we belong.
That change of tone and emphasis on the last words are nice little cues that it was said with genuine emotion. Jenna's plot was brutal, but effective. It seems that killing Nicodemus was only part 1 of his scheme. Part 2 was using his death to delay the Thorn Valley plan as much as possible, to keep kicking the can down the road, until the rats give up on the idea altogether. And it might have worked, if it weren't for that little hiccup being Mrs. Frisby.
In the morning.
Ma'am?
Yes. You will all die unless you leave the farm tonight.
Lies.
Please.
The situation with Jenna escalates out of control as he vents his fury out on Mrs. Frisby in plain view of everyone.
Don't listen. She's hysterical.
Get out now. Ah!
You get out.
Seems a bit extreme, doesn't it? After all the effort he put into trying to take control of the others, no one's going to follow his lead now. But it is consistent with what we know of him already, besides being a murderous psycho. Jenna's mental state when attacking Mrs. Frisby doesn't come out of nowhere. In his mind, he wants nothing more than to continue stealing, because that's what rats do. It's what they should do. From what we heard from Justin and Mr. Ages back in the rosebush, Jenna's been fighting against the motion to leave the farm for a long while now. The main counterpoint to Jenna was that humans would eventually realize their presence and annihilate them all. And now he's just learned that their former captors know where they are and are closing in. Sure, he's calling her a liar, but he doesn't actually believe that. What reason would she have to lie? He's furious because all of his efforts ended up being a total waste. Unless...
Stone.
But if only he had a way to fight back. The stone just became his last resort. The film's given us very little to work with when it comes to the amulet. All we get is this one line.
Courage of the heart is very rare. The stone has a power when it's there.
And we just have to assume that Jenna knows at least enough about it to elicit a reaction like this.
I want that stone.
If he could only get his hands on it, then no one could get in his way. Neither human nor rat. In a small twist, Jenna's cohort is the one to alert Justin. Unfortunately, what Jenna said to him earlier came true in the end. As Sullivan throws Justin his sword, Jenna strikes him down for it. It's a shame that we didn't get a bit more time with this character, because his role in the story is pretty interesting. Because Jenna was so open to him about killing their leader, Sullivan must have been wholly against the plan, and that the two were probably thinking of ways to dismiss the idea. But, unlike Jenna, he obviously didn't want it enough to start murdering his fellow rats. Now being 2 for 2, Jenna moves in for his 3rd kill. The two clash whilst everyone else watches, and as they fight, Justin connects the dots.
It was you. You killed Nicodemus. That was no accident.
Sadly, this was partially Justin's fault, where his laid-back attitude had consequences. Mr. Ages warned him that Jenna was dangerous, but Justin seemed to treat Jenna as an eccentric drama queen instead of the looming murderer he actually was. Justin was there the whole time, overseeing the operation. Had he been watching for Jenna's treachery, he might have prevented the whole disaster before it happened. Jenna responds without a shred of remorse.
Yes, I killed him. He wanted to destroy everything.
And in admittance to his crime, says this.
I've learned this much. Take what you can, when you can.
This one line neatly sums up his entire character, and then some. Because this fight is not just a power struggle between two would-be leaders, it's also a battle of ideologies. The future that Jenna wants requires taking by force. That if you can take what you want, why not do it? All the technological wonders the rats built in the Rosebush is solid proof that it gets results. The rats not only survived, but thrived because they were stealing. So you'd have to be an idiot to just give it all up. Jenna wanted the others to agree with this, and when that failed, came to the conclusion that violence was the answer. That if they couldn't see reason, he would rob the others of their agency and take control, which is the exact opposite of what Nicodemus does, who will let others come to their own decisions and not impede their free will. And here's the biggest takeaway from these ideologies. People in real life tend to do both. In this film, humans are portrayed as being pretty close to evil, but I would argue that they're much more represented as being powerful but short-sighted. From the experiments at NIMH to the farmer with his plow. The farmer, of course, has no idea about the ripple effect his actions have on the animals in the field. He's only doing his job and providing for his family. The scientists at NIMH probably weren't intending on giving the rats human-level intelligence, if they even intended anything. But because they did, the rats are now capable, and also culpable, of being exactly the same as humans. Which is why the plan is so important. At the very least, Mr. Aegis, Justin, and Nicodemus seem to understand this, and are working to avoid becoming like humans in this regard.
Our world is changing. We cannot stay here much longer.
They came to the conclusion to isolate entirely, therefore having no negative impact on the world around them. And that's why, in the end, Justin claims,
And you've learned nothing.
Jenna has a lust for power. His ambitions are practically the definition of short-sighted. Justin emerges victorious, but instead of finishing Jenna off, decides that addressing the situation is more important, even mirroring what Jenna said to a degree, but with a very different tone.
Friends,
we cannot move the Frisby home.
tonight we journey to Thorn Valley.
Let us return to the Rosebush,
Come.
where we belong.
It looks like Justin believed Jenna would finally back down, having been beaten and his schemes exposed, but once again underestimated the lengths that Jenna would go. Luckily for Justin, someone in the background is about to complete their redemption arc. Jenna's solution was to thematically stab his leader in the back, when all his efforts of diplomacy failed to stop the plan from happening. And as he's about to literally stab Justin in the back, what stops him?
That's what you call ironic.
The death of Jenna ends the battle of ideals, but the film isn't painting this as a victory. No, it's a somber moment where the rats gather to look at Jenna's dead body. And Mrs. Frisby just walks away in silence. She doesn't approach Justin or Aegis to ask what the next move is, because she knows there isn't one. It's over. The internal conflict of the rats costed her everything, and now there's no one left who can help her. All she can think to do is comfort her children.
Soon now.
This would appear to be rock bottom for our protagonist. But remember, this film is grounded in realism, and things can always get worse. Those violins from before are back, using the same musical cue to build up suspense, right before disaster strikes.
The block! It's sinking!
What?
Credit due to Justin and the rats, they break out of their stupor and leap into action immediately. But things quickly take a gruesome turn when it's obvious that it's not working. All because she refused to give up on one of her children, she's now losing all of them. For her, this is the ultimate worst thing. Worse than dying, and the animators make sure you know it by the expression on her face. But it seems that level of desperation is exactly what triggers the amulet. And in a truly spectacular display of animation, Mrs. Brisby uses its power to single-handedly move the house. A perfect ending for a perfect film. Is what I would say if I actually believed that perfection existed. Every film has flaws. Unfortunately, this resolution has one. It's time we talked about the, magic stuff, because that's pretty much what it is. I already mentioned how Bluth wanted more mystical elements in his adaptation, and that alone isn't a bad idea. It'll just make things a bit different to the original book. A major part of the story is how technologically advanced the rats are, so you can just marry the two ideas together to show technology that's so advanced it appears to be magical, when really it's still just science. Rat science. What's really annoying is that a lot of the groundwork is already there. Even though everything the rats use is man-made, what they create from it looks very alien. That maybe, though they have relative intelligence to humans, their imagination might work a bit differently. Therefore, they make different leaps in technology that humans wouldn't have thought of. This way, we have an explanation for all the animated objects and telekinesis going on, as well as the unique style of architecture in the rosebush. Unfortunately, there's nothing concrete in the film that actually tells us this. So why is this a problem for the story? Because Mrs. Brisby using magic powers to save her family cheapens the finale a little. The film lacks a proper explanation for it. Don't get it twisted. Does it fit thematically? Yes. Is it staying in character for Mrs. Brisby to do this? Absolutely yes. But mechanically, it could have been set up much better. The stone responding to Mrs. Brisby could have been a feature implemented by Nicodemus and Jonathan, since the stone was always intended to go to her. The telekinesis magic/technology is present multiple times, most predominantly with Nicodemus. Even this could have had some explanation, that it requires a strong mental acuity and concentration, which would explain why Nicodemus uses it and no one else does. And then the stone could be a unique creation that requires something else, like force of will or ambition, which would make it very desirable for people like Jenna. Funnily enough, in the book, there is a chapter that takes place in a library, where Mrs. Brisby discovers more about the rats. In the film, it gets glossed over.
Take Mrs. Brisby to the library. We'll approach Nicodemus when the meeting's over.
It could have been the perfect opportunity to explain the weird tech magic. That being said, animation is expensive and time-consuming. Sometimes, sacrifices need to be made. If only there was something we could have cut for more time. Oh well. Oh, and if you think fleshing this out would break up the story too much, I went and made an example scene that takes place right after Mrs. Brisby leaves the rats. That more or less demonstrates what I'm talking about. Because I'm just that big of a nerd.
Goodbye. I must be crazy.
You seem troubled, my friend. I am, but I'm not gonna ask. One day, it will be your judgment that counts. I'd have you speak your mind. Letting her do this, giving her that stone, hasn't she been through enough already? Be at ease. The amulet is safe in her hands, and Jonathan's spirit may rest, knowing his family is protected. I know it was Jonathan's wish for it to go to her, but are you sure she can handle it? What that stone's capable of? It's just like what you... She isn't like you. No one's like you. There is much more to Mrs. Brisby than what most see. The stone will achieve only what the heart most desires. All the same, she may need you before the end. Watch over her. Right. I should get going. End scene. So, cringy voice acting aside, I know it's not perfect, but it gives us at least some clues to what the stone does, and it doesn't feel too out of place for the characters to have this conversation. Yeah, plus it gives us an excuse to have these two talk alone, which would be nice. But c'est la vie. For a moment there, the fight between Justin and Jenna was presented as the film's climax. But then the rug got pulled from under us, as Mrs. Brisby saving her family is the true conclusion to the story. As she passes out from fatigue, the rats simply look at her, at a loss for words. This is usually the part of the video where I'll try to break down what the film is trying to say, what the main theme is, and how the film goes about saying it. The reason this video took me so long to finish is because the secret of NIMH is saying a lot of things. It could be said that the film's lesson on technological progress is by far the loudest. The rats of NIMH, gifted with intelligence, attempt to make their lives better with technology, but they threaten to make the same mistakes that NIMH made when they uplifted them. That trying to be great might not always coincide with doing good. The rosebush is a technological marvel, a true achievement of science, but it all came at the cost of draining resources that didn't belong to them. The same way that NIMH created something incredible, something that brought common rats into the realm of sentience. Only, it came at the suffering of who knows how many lesser creatures, the rats themselves included. Jenna's accomplice considered animals not of their society as lower creatures, and the fact that the rats seem so divided on how to move forward suggests that he might not be the only one. So the core of the film then might actually be responsibility, that the rats, like humans, need to be careful on how they use their gifts. It shouldn't come as a surprise when I mentioned the elephant in the room, about how the cautionary tale of the rats of NIMH reflects the real-world issues we have today. Deforestation, the loss of natural habitats, polluting our oceans, our cities, and even the atmosphere, to drain whatever resources with reckless abandon in order to make life easier. I'm not going any deeper into it than that because it's really not for this video, but you should be able to see the connection. The rats taking what they need makes life easier for them, but not so much anyone else. If you're expecting me to say that the concept the film explores most is stealing, that would also be a good guess. But no. To take what you can, when you can, is a dilemma that the rats are struggling with. Mrs. Brisby's story has nothing to do with stealing. She doesn't learn to be responsible because that's not a lesson she needs to learn, and at no point does she have to weigh the cost of progress. Her story is simple, but there is a root cause for the problems that Mrs. Brisby is dealing with, and it has nothing to do with her son getting pneumonia. At the beginning of the film, the very first words we hear are about a character that we never got to experience, Jonathan Brisby. But from what we hear about him from others, we're painted a picture of someone who was resourceful, daring, and above all else, reliable. Without him, there would be no rats of NIMH. He even continued to help them, at great risk to his life no less. And yet, he still found time to care for his family, using his intellect to educate his wife and children, teaching them valuable skills like reading. He was clearly a good father and a good friend. He was so reliable, in fact, that his wife felt useless after his death. When we're introduced to Mrs. Brisby, her first act is to seek help from someone, hoping that the medicine Mr. Aegis made would solve her problems. And when the situation gets even worse, she makes an attempt to fix it herself, but fails. Everything would have ended right there if not for someone else looking out for her, a fact that Mrs. Brisby was painfully aware of. When she breaks down, she wishes her husband were still alive. She does this because she believes that he would have figured something out, that he would have kept their family safe. Or in other words, she doesn't believe that she can. After all, we don't even know her name. It never once gets mentioned. Everyone just calls her Mrs. Jonathan Brisby. Her time is spent going from character to character, desperate for a solution, leaning on others, because that's what she did with her husband. Her real problem stems from being dependent. This is the connecting tissue that ties the stories together, because the rats are also struggling with being independent, in their own way. Mrs. Brisby's journey led her to seek help from the rats, yet when she arrived, Nicodemus was under the impression that she would help the rats more than they would help her. And true, she did tip them off that NIMH was coming. The film likes to play with the idea that Nicodemus can see into the future, so perhaps that's all that line was. But with deeper analysis, he was watching Mrs. Brisby's story play out, just like we were, and he saw how she was struggling with being independent from her late husband. Yet, little by little, started gaining courage and confidence, until she was making difficult and bold decisions without the influence of anyone else. Nicodemus saw how her problems mirrored the issues that the rats faced. That if this meek, simple field mouse can learn to be fully independent, then why can't they? As a character, Mrs. Brisby has been incredibly endearing. There are constant reminders on her journey of how out of depth she is, faced with incredible odds against forces far greater than herself, and surrounded by people who are far smarter, stronger, and wiser than she is. At her worst, we see a small widow, struggling to raise 4 children by herself, and always mentioning how terrified she is of just about everything. But at her best, we see the qualities that make her a good mother figure. She's the kind of person who will stop to help a stranger and listen to their problems, despite the overwhelming problems that she's already dealing with. The kind of person who will try to connect to others on an emotional level, whilst also conscious of the fact that she might be a burden to them. When Mr. Aegis showed a rare moment of vulnerability, she drops everything to simply share a tender moment with him, despite knowing that NIMH is coming and that she needs to warn them. Despite seeing that they failed to move her family to safety, she chooses to take a moment to grieve with him, because she could tell, at that very moment, he needed it. It's these positive aspects to her character that make others want to help her. Even though she's a widow who's really down on her luck, it never feels like it's done out of pity. The shrew didn't get annoyed with Mrs. Brisby because she lost her nerve back on the plough, but because she revealed just how little faith she has in herself. These are not the actions of someone who pities you, but rather someone who's going to push you into doing the hard things because they believe that you can. The first great trial she undertook was meeting the Great Owl, which, if you're a mouse, is like the personification of death itself. The Great Owl hinted that he knew things about her husband that she did not, and she'd have very good reason to press him for answers, but she doesn't. She was only concerned on what was really important, saving her son. And that's the moment the owl decided to finally divulge information. Her coming to him showed not only nerve, but selflessness. The qualities that allowed Mrs. Brisby to unlock the stone's power are the ones that she's been showing the entire film. Her selflessness, kindness, and courage. Or as the film puts it, love is the key. And now, for just a moment, everyone's looking at her for who she is, rather than Jonathan's widow. The end of her story marks a new chapter for the Rats of NIMH, a change that will hopefully be for the better. With Jenna gone and Justin now leading the way, they will move towards a future where they won't rely on stealing, and by extension, won't rely on humans. The last few minutes shows us the Brisby family enjoying the spring day outside.
Mama, I'm tired of that. I want to get up.
And staying true to character, Mrs. Brisby's still not taking any chances with Timmy's well-being.
Well, you're not getting up.
I also enjoy this detail here. Using the stone seems to have actually burned her hands, which was, in itself, yet another show of her selfless nature. After watching Mrs. Brisby spend all this time and effort to keep her family safe, it's a nice poetic gesture to have her daughter bandage her wounds. All in all, it's a quaint, yet strong ending. And then the film reminds us that Jeremy still exists.
Hey! Your house is moved!
He does, however, end up meeting a female after all.
Let me have the sparkly! I gotta have the sparkly!
I gave it to Justin.
Justin? Who the heck is Justin?
The leader of the rats.
That's actually a good question. Why did she give it away? It might seem like a strange decision for Mrs. Brisby. That stone was a memento from her husband, given to her as a gift. Plus, it would be a pretty handy thing to keep around. She doesn't actually explain to Jeremy why she gave it away, but for us, the audience, she doesn't need to. Giving the stone to the rats slots in perfectly with everything we know about Mrs. Frisby. They're about to embark on a long and arduous journey, and sure, the stone would be helpful if she ever needed to protect her family again, but the rats might need it even more. So, why not give it back? And give them the best chance of succeeding. So there's your in-character reasoning, but it's also a thematic wrap-up to her story. Giving away the stone is proof that she believes she doesn't really need it. That if she and her family are ever in danger again, she'll deal with it. It might not be the wisest choice, and Jonathan might not have approved. But what really matters is what Mrs. Frisby chooses to do now. It's her choice to make. You know what? I'm glad Jeremy was in this film as much as he was. He demonstrates an important message that we could all learn from. That if you're struggling to find the right person, there's something you can do that will fix all your problems.
Be athletic.
Nope, even better. Fucking Jeremy.
It's done.
I need to start making some shorter videos. Well, to summarize, I thought the addition of fantasy elements was integrated quite well in some areas, while a little wonky in others. But for what the runtime was, we had a shocking amount of strong dialogue and character depth. So, for a bottom line, The Secret of NIMH is one of the most thought-provoking stories that can be consumed by older and younger viewers. It's the kind of story that makes you think about what would happen if this took place in our world. Because it's possible, if humans did create another species with relative intelligence, that we could cooperate and build together. On the flip side, it could also lead to a devastating war, as there would always be the fear that humans have created their own worst enemy. No, I'm not worried about the AI uprising. Nope, not me. It's a shame we couldn't get an expanded movie version, one that could delve a bit more into Jenna as a person, rather than just what he represents, or some insight into how the rats discovered Thorn Valley, both of which actually are expanded upon in the book. The Great Owl, for one, is who told the rats about Thorn Valley, which would explain why Nicodemus called him a comrade. But as far as the animated version goes, we'll never get these answers. What's that? A sequel, you say? That continues the story in Thorn Valley? But Don Bluth had no involvement, and it contains none of the nuance or ethical intrigue or gorgeous animation of the original? Well then, good for them. I can't wait to not make a video about it.
Do I eat ass? That's a question. Do you eat ass? Of course I do. Where the rats, where the rats, this, where the rats. Where the rats, where the rats, this, where the rats. Where the rats, where the rats, this, where the rats. Where the rats, where the rats, this, where the rats. Ladies and gentlemen, the best jokes of the decade. That 30% of the vote. Rats.